The lights of downtown Miami blinked like stars, casting their shimmer over the rooftop as I stood there, a glass of champagne in hand, trying to hold it together. This was supposed to be the moment I could finally breathe. 10 years of work, sleepless nights, sacrificing everything, the kind of grind that ate me alive, and tonight was supposed to be my victory lap. My company, my success, my dream finally realized. People around me were laughing, chatting, and clinking glasses like they hadn't spent the last few years making everything feel impossible. Investors, clients, all of them there for me, and for the first time I could feel it. I had earned this. But then I started noticing the whispers, glances, eyes darting away when I met them. At first I thought it was just my nerves, the booze messing with my head. But no, it was real, and it was directed at me. I turned to scan the crowd, trying to keep my composure, and that's when I saw her, Nicole. She came in late, as usual, her high heels clicking against the concrete floor. Her head was high, her smile that perfect mix of confidence and arrogance that always rubbed me the wrong way. She wasn't alone. No, she had her arm wrapped around Dean Wallace. I froze. Dean, the mogul. The guy I'd helped build up, the one I'd backed quietly for years. We'd built something huge together, or at least I'd thought we had. But there he was, with Nicole, smiling like they had it all figured out. Then the kiss. Right there in front of everyone. Like they were marking territory, like they didn't care who saw. Laughter broke out, cruel and sharp, and I couldn't breathe. My heart hammered in my chest. Someone yelled, "That's what a weak man gets." And the sound of it cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. Dean walked over then, his smirk wide, confident. He leaned in close, like he was sharing some inside joke with the world, and handed me an envelope. "First order of business," he said, his voice low and mocking. "Finalizing the divorce. Nicole's handing it to you." He stepped back, that grin still plastered on his face. "And leave, Marcus. This is my company now." I stood there, the crowd's laughter still ringing in my ears, and for a moment, everything felt like it was spinning out of control. But somehow I didn't say a word. Not one. I just took the envelope, turned, and walked. I didn't look back. I didn't say a word as I walked out of the rooftop, the envelope burning in my pocket like a hot brand. The laughter from the crowd was still loud in my ears, but I kept my steps steady, deliberate. Phones flashed around me, their lenses catching every moment, but I didn't care. I was done with all of it. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like it took forever. The walls, the sterile lights, the polished floors. It all felt like a dream I didn't belong to anymore. When the doors opened, I stepped out into the cool Miami air, and it hit me hard. The city looked so damn perfect, so shiny, but all I could think about was how everything had just been shattered, like glass on a concrete floor. I didn't take a cab. I walked, letting the chill settle over me, pushing all the noise from the event out of my mind. The apartment was waiting, the condo that had felt like a trophy for so long, but now it felt like a damn tomb. Inside, I didn't even bother taking off my suit jacket. I just threw my keys on the table and walked through the place like a ghost. The view of the skyline that used to make me proud now felt like a cruel joke. The sleek furniture, the art pieces I'd paid a fortune for, even the damn candles Nicole liked so much. It was all a lie. I could feel it. Every inch of this place was a lie. I didn't stop. I went straight for the bar, poured myself a drink, and slammed it back. The burn didn't feel strong enough to match what was crawling inside me. The garage. That was where I needed to be. It was the one place I could always escape to, even when everything else felt like it was slipping away. The moment I stepped through the door, it was like stepping into my own skin again. The smell of oil and metal, the hum of tools and machines. It was mine. No one could take it from me. I crossed the workshop to the far corner, where I kept the locked cabinet. The one place no one knew about, not even Nicole. Inside were the backup financials, the business archives, the stuff no one could ever find if things went south. It had taken me years to put everything in place, always thinking ahead, always preparing for the worst. My father had taught me that lesson well. Trust no one, not even those you think you know. I unlocked the cabinet, the key sliding smoothly into the lock. When the door opened, I pulled out the thick binder. My hand hovered over it for a second, the weight of it like a promise. Dean had no idea. None of them did. For the last 6 years, I'd been the silent investor in his empire. Majority shareholder, too. The documents in my hand proved it. Legal. Watertight. I didn't have to do a damn thing yet. The pieces were all in place. But the grin that spread across my face wasn't from relief. It was from something colder. Something calculating. I sat down, opened the binder and started flipping through the papers. Each page was a plan. A backup. A piece of leverage that would bring Dean's empire to its knees. His fortune, his credibility, all of it. I was going to watch it crumble, and there wouldn't be a damn thing he could do about it. My mind worked quickly, the gears turning. Cancel the high-end inventory orders. Pull the performance parts shipments. Freeze the capital. It was all so simple. It was all right here, waiting for me to pull the strings. And when I was done, Dean's company wouldn't just suffer. It would burn. But there was more. Something deeper. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving that the people who thought they could walk over me, who thought they could strip away everything I'd worked for, would regret it. Dean would regret thinking he could take my life, my wife, and my company, and just walk away with it all. I stood up, my fingers still running over the documents. This wasn't a gut reaction. It wasn't anger driving me. This was methodical, cold, thoughtful. And for the first time since I'd walked out of that event, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. The night felt endless, but I didn't care. I stayed in the workshop, the hum of the machines around me like background noise to the storm raging in my head. My fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, each click and tap adding weight to the plan that was taking shape. I wasn't going to just sit back and watch my empire fall. No, I was going to take it down piece by piece until there was nothing left. I pulled up Dean's accounts, his operations, vendor contracts, the stuff that no one ever thought would be seen by anyone else. It was my access that made all this possible. A quiet, almost invisible stake in everything. I'd kept my presence hidden for years, but now it was time to let it be known. Let it burn. First, I canceled the high-end inventory shipments tied to my investment firm. Just like that, the suppliers who'd been promised thousands of parts and pieces were going to get nothing. The orders were void, and the timing couldn't have been worse for Dean. I grinned as I hit send on the cancellation emails, knowing it would send waves of panic through his operations. Then the exclusive performance parts orders. Gone. Vanished with a few clicks. The engines, the specialty equipment, everything that had made his brand what it was, disappearing into thin air. Those vendors had no idea what was coming, and once they got the memo, the fallout would be inevitable. But that wasn't enough. I knew the real pain wouldn't hit until I went after the dealerships. The ones that had been relying on Marcus Ridley's quiet capital for years. I drafted the withdrawal notices one by one, citing breach of trust and professional ethics, and slapped on all the receipts to back it up. Each signature I forged, each withdrawal of partnership was another nail in the coffin. I could almost hear the confusion spreading, even from my seat in the workshop. $85 million in capital pulled out. Cold, swift, clean. I couldn't help but chuckle as I clicked confirm on the transfer. That money was Dean's lifeblood, and now it was mine to do with as I pleased. No more loans, no more backroom deals. The empire Dean had built with my help was crumbling under its own weight. I could already see the headlines in my head. Mystery investor pulls out. Company faces collapse. I wouldn't be surprised if there were whispers starting in the executive suites. Next came the payroll. I marked all of it for audit. Every last sponsorship contract, every marketing agreement, it all went under the microscope. If Dean wanted to play dirty, I'd make sure every penny that was spent was questioned. Everything went into limbo, every move tied up in red tape. By the time the sun started to creep up, painting the windows with light, I was still at the desk. Whiskey bottle nearly empty. The only sound in the room was the soft buzz of my computer screen and the rhythmic tick of the clock on the wall. The plans had been set in motion, and now there was nothing left to do but wait. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel anything that resembled peace. But I knew this. It wasn't over yet. The sunrise didn't mean anything, not really. It was just another day. A day where everything I had built, all the sacrifices, the pain, the strategy, was finally being put into motion. My revenge wouldn't be in the form of headlines or public humiliation or even money. It was in the quiet destruction, the slow crumble that Dean wouldn't be able to stop. All I had to do was wait. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen, squinting through the haze of sleep. 70+ missed calls. A dozen emails from panicked executives. 3 voicemails from Nicole. The messages were all the same. Crisis, panic, chaos. Vendors demanding payments, payroll bounced, contracts gone. I didn't even bother listening to the voicemails. I already knew what they were going to say. Dean's empire was crumbling, and I was the one holding the match. I left my phone where it was, untouched, and walked into the kitchen. The air in the condo felt stale, heavy with the remnants of yesterday. I didn't care. I cracked open a carton of eggs and started cooking. I hadn't had a decent meal in weeks, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't in a rush. No meetings, no phone calls, just me and breakfast. The eggs were perfect, the bacon crisp, and I took my time. The silence felt good, like it belonged to me. For once, I wasn't running, trying to stay ahead of something. I was here, in the moment, and everything else could wait. But it didn't. The phone rang again, this time with a call from the building's concierge. "Mr. Ridley, there's a woman downstairs. She says it's urgent. Jenna Park. She's asking to speak with you." I froze for a moment. Jenna. Nicole's assistant. Dean's junior exec. She was the kind of person who always had her head down, always playing it safe. I couldn't imagine why she'd be standing in my lobby now, but I knew better than to dismiss it. "Send her up," I told the concierge, wiping my mouth with a napkin before tossing it into the trash. It wasn't long before the elevator doors opened, and there she was. Jenna Park, looking like she was about to fall apart. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared, and she looked as if she'd been awake for days. She held a manila envelope in her hands like it was a shield. "Marcus," she started, her voice shaky, and then she just held out the envelope. I took it from her without a word, watching as she tried to steady herself. I motioned for her to sit, but she didn't move. I don't know what's happening," she stammered. "Dean, he's freaking out. Nicole's scared. Everything's falling apart." She wiped her eyes, clearly trying to hold it together. "They want you to look at this. It's an emergency settlement." I slid my finger along the top of the envelope, pulling out the stack of papers inside. It was a mess, just like everything else in this world. I glanced at the first page, but I already knew what it was. Nicole and Dean trying to buy their way out, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. I set the papers down on the table, my gaze never leaving Jenna's. "How long have you been working for Dean?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, like I wasn't even processing the panic inside of me. Her shoulders tensed, and she hesitated before answering. 2 years. I don't know what's happening. It's all falling apart so fast. People are yelling. Dean's not even making sense anymore. He's losing it." I didn't respond immediately, letting the weight of her words sink in. Dean losing it. Nicole scared. I could see it, hear it, in the way she was falling apart in front of me. "So what's the plan, Jenna?" I asked, my voice cold, direct. "What does Dean think he can offer me now?" Her eyes flickered nervously. He doesn't know. He's not in control anymore. The vendors, the partners, the clients. They're all pulling away. And Nicole. She's afraid of what happens next. She says if you accept the settlement, it'll all calm down. They'll fix it. I looked at her for a long time. There was a moment where I could feel the shift, where I realized this wasn't just business. This was personal. Nicole had always known how to play both sides, but now, she was the one scared. I leaned back in my chair and folded my arms, trying to suppress the smile threatening to creep across my face. "You're right about one thing," I said, my voice low, almost casual. This is falling apart. But you don't need me to fix it, do you? Jenna stared at me, not understanding. You know what kind of leader Dean really is, don't you? I asked. She looked away, her hands gripping the edges of the chair like it was the only thing holding her up. He's not what he used to be. Not anymore. Her voice cracked. He's unraveling. I don't know what's happening, but I've never seen him like this. He's not the guy we built this on. It's all slipping. I let the silence stretch between us. I could hear the distant sounds of the city outside, but inside, it was just me and her. Jenna, standing there, desperate for something she couldn't even name. I looked down at the settlement papers again. Nicole and Dean's last-ditch attempt to save face. But there was nothing here I hadn't already planned for. This was just a formality, a way for them to pretend they still had control. They can't fix it, I said, leaning forward. Not anymore. Jenna's face dropped, her expression crumbling. What are you going to do? She whispered. I didn't answer right away. I just reached for the envelope and set it down, the papers inside still untouched. I wasn't interested in their deal. It was too late for that. And as I watched her walk out of my condo, the weight of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours settled into place. The storm was coming. It was already here. I watched Jenna leave, the door clicking softly behind her. She'd been scared, and for good reason. The real truth was that Nicole and Dean had run out of time. Their settlement was a joke, and I had no interest in anything they were offering. So I wrote my counteroffer. It wasn't a negotiation. It was an ultimatum. I slipped the papers into a new envelope, sealing it with the same cold precision that had kept me one step ahead for years. I didn't need to wait for a response. I knew it would come. I was done playing nice. The next morning, I walked into Dean's headquarters like it was just another day. The building was sleek and polished, just like the empire they'd built. But the nervous energy in the air was impossible to ignore. Staff were walking faster than usual, eyes darting back and forth. The security guards at the entrance looked confused, like they weren't sure whether they should be welcoming me or keeping me out. There was a palpable tension in the lobby, the kind of silence that lets you know something's wrong, but no one's brave enough to say it. I walked past a few clients who were pacing, whispering among themselves, clearly worried about what was coming. It didn't matter to me. I wasn't here for them. I was here for Dean. I made my way to the elevator, feeling every second tick by. The door slid open when I reached the top floor, and I stepped out into the boardroom, where Dean, Nicole, and a few of the senior partners were already seated. Their faces were a mess. Eyes bloodshot, shoulders slumped, and the kind of stillness in the room that only comes from complete defeat. Dean looked like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened at the collar. Nicole wasn't much better. She looked like a woman who'd spent every last ounce of her energy trying to hold things together, only to realize she couldn't. The partners who were with them didn't seem much more composed. They shifted in their seats, exchanging nervous glances, unsure of what to expect next. I took my time. I set the envelope on the table in front of me. There was no need to rush this. No need to play by anyone's rules but my own. Here's how it's going to go, I said, my voice calm. It was the kind of calm that could freeze a room. Dean, you're stepping down as CEO. Nicole, you forfeit all financial claims to the company. And from this moment forward, I take full control. I let the words hang in the air. I didn't flinch. Dean opened his mouth to say something, but I wasn't finished. You've broken every single clause in our contracts, I continued, flipping open the binder I'd brought with me. I slid the pages across the table, each one detailing breach after breach, complete with receipts. This company is mine whether you want to admit it or not. I've got the proof, the clauses, the legal documentation. It's all here. The partners glanced at each other, clearly rattled. Dean was visibly stunned, his face reddening as he processed what I'd said. He opened his mouth again, but no words came out. Sign, I said. The word was like a command. One of the partners hesitated, then reached for the papers, looking at Dean for reassurance. Dean just sat there, blinking, like he was trying to make sense of everything. I could see it in his eyes, the realization that this was the end. He was losing everything. "I don't have time for a debate," I added. "You either sign or this goes public. And you both know what that will do to your reputations." There was a long pause. One by one, the partners picked up their pens. The sound of them signing was sharp, final. Each signature sealed the deal. Each one was a step closer to the end of Dean's empire. Nicole, who had been sitting still for most of this, finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, and her face had an expression I hadn't seen before: resignation. She picked up the papers, signed without a word, and pushed them back toward me. "Done?" she whispered, as if the words had been ripped from her. Dean didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His silence spoke volumes. I stood up, sliding the binder back into my bag. The partners looked uncomfortable, shifting in their chairs like they couldn't wait to get out of the room. The air had turned cold, and no one dared speak. I didn't need to hear their protests. They knew what had to be done. They just didn't have the guts to admit it. I turned to leave, knowing the room was already starting to shift behind me. Dean and Nicole's reign was over, and I was walking out with the company under my control. I walked out of the boardroom with the weight of 100 decisions pressing down on me. The company was mine now, but it felt more like I'd inherited a sinking ship than a victory. Dean's empire was a hollow shell, a brand built on quicksand, and no matter how much I owned, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to rebuild it from the ground up. But I wasn't about to pour more of myself into that mess. Not anymore. I started liquidating assets right away. The kind of cold, businesslike moves that would make any investor proud. I pulled out what was left of Dean's bloated, overhyped inventory and shut down the wasteful partnerships that had propped up his empire. But I wasn't just cutting ties with the past. I was consolidating ownership under a new holding firm. Something clean, something real, something built on purpose, not greed. The money started flowing, but I wasn't in it for the profit anymore. I wasn't interested in what was in my bank account. I was looking for something else, something meaningful. And that's when I remembered Andrea Liu. I'd heard of her a few years ago, a technician turned community organizer in Detroit, running a garage for at-risk youth. She wasn't trying to make a name for herself or become some kind of public hero. She was just giving kids the chance to learn, to restore old cars and gain trade skills they could use for the rest of their lives. It wasn't charity. It was opportunity. Real opportunity. I contacted her, and within a week, I was standing in front of her garage in Detroit. The place was run down, the walls cracked and peeling. The air smelled like oil and gasoline. It wasn't pretty, but it was alive. The kids inside were elbow-deep in grease, carefully working on engines and car parts. They moved with purpose like they belonged. It was the kind of energy you couldn't fake. Andrea was there, her hands stained with oil, her face lit up by the light spilling in from the cracked windows. She wiped her hands on a rag when she saw me, her expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. "You actually came," she said, raising an eyebrow. "I said I would," I replied, looking around at the place. It wasn't much, but it didn't need to be. The heart was there. The soul was there. She walked me through the garage, showing me how the kids learned the trade. They worked on cars, engines, anything they could get their hands on. But there was something about the way they moved, the way they took pride in their work. This wasn't just some after-school program. It was the beginning of a future for these kids. A future they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. I watched them for a while, taking it all in before I turned to Andrea. "How much would it take to scale this up across the state?" I asked her, the question hanging between us. She hesitated. I could see the doubt in her eyes, the weight of the decision already pushing down on her. "It's not that simple," she said slowly. "It's not just about money. It's about the right people, the right places, the right systems." "I'm not asking about that," I said. "I'm asking about the money." Her eyes narrowed, and she opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. I pulled out my checkbook and wrote a number down. $10 million. Her eyes went wide, her mouth snapping shut in disbelief. She didn't even know how to react. I didn't blame her. "That's not charity," I said, sliding the check across the table to her. "It's justice. It's what this place deserves. What those kids deserve." Andrea stood there, staring at the check like it might disappear at any moment. She shook her head, still not quite believing what I had just done. I don't know what to say," she finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to say anything," I told her, standing up to leave. "Just do what you're already doing. And make it bigger. Make it count." As I walked out of the garage, the sounds of the kids working faded behind me. The world outside was the same, loud, fast, and full of distractions. But I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't the rush of victory I was used to. It wasn't revenge. It was something else. Something that had nothing to do with the money or the company or the people who had wronged me. It was peace. Real peace. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next battle. I knew that I had found something that mattered. Something worth building. The phone call came a few days later, and I knew what it was before I even picked up. Nicole. She wanted to meet. I wasn't surprised. She needed to make her move, spin this disaster into something that wouldn't ruin her reputation entirely. I could already guess what kind of story she'd try to sell, but I didn't care. I knew what had happened, and I wasn't going to let her paint it any other way. We met at a diner I used to go to before everything changed. The kind of place that never saw the light of a corporate sponsorship, but always served food that didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. A neutral place. No luxuries. No pretense. I got there first, sitting in a booth by the window, staring out at the rain that had started to fall. The city looked different now. A little grayer, a little less forgiving. But it was familiar. I needed familiar. Nicole walked in like she always did, heels clicking against the tile, hair done just right. But there was something about her today that was off. She was tense, more fragile than I had ever seen her. But it didn't matter. Not anymore. She slid into the booth across from me and immediately put a folder down between us. No pleasantries, no small talk. Just the folder. Dean's PR team had been busy. I could tell the moment I opened it. The statement inside was already written. The words carefully crafted to spin the collapse as nothing more than a restructure. A natural evolution of the business. A strategic shift to improve operations. Bullshit. I didn't even have to read the whole thing. The first paragraph made me see red. I looked up at Nicole, no warmth in my eyes. "Really?" I asked, voice flat. "You're going to pretend this is some business decision? You're going to make this look like a choice?" Her fingers fidgeted on the table, but she didn't say anything. I could see the way she was waiting, like she expected me to buy into this lie. But I wasn't having it. "No," I said, throwing the folder back in her direction. "No more spinning. No more pretending. This is betrayal. This is about you and Dean, thinking you could destroy everything I built without any consequences. And now you want to sweep it under the rug?" I shook my head. "That's not how this ends." Her eyes flickered for a second, and she let out a long breath. "What do you want me to say, Marcus?" Her voice was low, defeated. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "Tell the truth. You're not a victim here, Nicole. You never were. You made your choices. This is the result of those choices." We both knew what had happened. She knew exactly what was coming. So I handed her a pen. "We're going to rewrite this," I said, pushing the papers toward her. "Line by line. And you're going to admit that everything crumbled because of your betrayal." She didn't hesitate. She picked up the pen, looking at me like she was already tired of fighting. Slowly, she started crossing out the corporate jargon, replacing it with blunt truth. Dean lost control. Nicole mismanaged the business. The empire crumbled because of greed, not strategy. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. We worked through the entire statement, the silence between us stretching, but neither of us breaking. The words hit harder than I expected. Not just for her, but for me too. I wasn't doing this for revenge anymore. This wasn't a victory. It was a reckoning. And we both knew it. When we were done, I slid the final version back toward her. She looked at it for a long moment, her face unreadable, before she signed it. There wasn't any resistance in her. No fight. Just a quiet, exhausted acceptance. "You done now?" I asked after the ink dried. She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Maybe guilt, maybe regret, but it didn't matter. Not anymore. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Did you ever really love me?" The question hung there in the space between us. I let the silence stretch out, giving it room to breathe, before I answered. "No," I said quietly. "Not the you who thought betrayal was a shortcut." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. She knew and I knew. The love I'd had for her was buried long ago, swallowed up by the lies and the greed. We weren't the people we once were, and there was no going back. I stood up, slipping my jacket on, and glanced at her one last time. "You'll get the fallout," I said, my voice low. "But you knew this day would come." I left the diner without looking back. The press statement dropped like a bomb. It wasn't even a few hours before the media was on it, spinning the truth into a frenzy. Headlines blasted across every major outlet. Executive collapse due to personal misconduct. They didn't even bother sugarcoating it. The legal and business communities were all over it, dissecting every angle. Marcus Ridley, the silent investor who'd been the backbone of the company for years, had pulled the rug out from under Dean and Nicole, and everyone had an opinion about it. I watched it unfold from my condo, my phone buzzing nonstop with notifications. News outlets, legal blogs, financial analysts, they all wanted a piece of the story. It wasn't just the collapse of a company. It was a public spectacle. Social media ate it up. Memes flew across the feeds faster than I could refresh the page. People were sharing articles with lines like, "A masterclass in financial accountability," and "The quiet man who took down an empire." Suddenly, I was a symbol, not just of business savvy, but of something deeper. Of a new kind of accountability in a world that had gotten used to turning a blind eye to the mess behind the curtain. Dean's reputation shredded under the weight of the truth. He was removed from multiple boards, no surprise there. The damage was done, and no polished statement could undo the public fallout. His career was a ticking clock, and every minute was another nail in the coffin. His former partners? They were next. Investigations into their ethics violations were already underway. The business world was out for blood, and I wasn't the only one watching it all burn. As for Nicole, she disappeared from the public eye. No interviews, no comments. The woman who had spent years in the spotlight was now hiding in the shadows. Maybe she realized, too late, that there was no coming back from this. I didn't know. I didn't care. Her role in it all was done, and whatever consequences came her way were her own to deal with. Then came the offers. At first, they were a trickle, then a flood. Private equity firms, investors, even business schools, they all wanted a piece of me. They wanted to know how I did it, how I'd pulled off what they called the business takedown of the decade. I was a financial icon overnight, and the money they were offering was staggering. Consulting, speaking gigs, book deals, the world was suddenly my oyster. But none of it felt like a win. I wasn't interested in any of it. I didn't want to write a book about revenge or how to climb to the top. I'd been there, done that, and it didn't change anything. What was the point of all the success if you lost yourself along the way? There was one exception, though. I agreed to speak at a symposium, a lecture on ethics in business. Dr. Marlene Trent had reached out to me. She was a tough academic, brilliant in her own right, with a reputation for taking no shit. Her research focused on financial accountability and how business practices could either uphold or dismantle entire industries. She wasn't interested in easy answers, and she didn't give a damn about celebrity. When she invited me to speak, it wasn't because of my name. It was because she genuinely wanted to know how I'd navigated the mess, the deals, the systems. I don't think I was the person she thought I was, but she wanted to hear my side. She understood the gray areas, the compromises, the tough choices that weren't always made with clean hands. I agreed mostly because it felt right. If I was going to be a symbol of anything, let it be something real, something with substance. Maybe I had learned something through all of this. Maybe I had a responsibility to say something meaningful, even if I wasn't the best person to be saying it. The night before the symposium, I sat in my workshop, watching the rain fall outside. It was quiet, peaceful. The world felt far away, even though it was closing in on me. I wasn't the man I used to be, and honestly, that was okay. The firestorm had passed. I had come through it without losing myself, and that was enough. Maybe it wasn't about redemption. Maybe it was just about moving forward without carrying the weight of the past. I took a sip of whiskey, leaned back in my chair, and waited for the next chapter to begin. Months had passed since the firestorm, and the world had shifted in ways I didn't expect. I wasn't watching it burn anymore. I wasn't interested in the fallout. I was focused on something else now, rebuilding. Dr. Marlene Trent and I crossed paths again, this time in a small, quiet bar tucked away from the chaos. She'd been working on a paper about ethics and financial retaliation in high-stakes partnerships, and she wanted to get my perspective on it. The conversation was more intense than I anticipated, but it felt right. She wasn't asking for some canned answer. She wasn't looking for sound bites or simple solutions. She wanted the truth, and I gave it to her. After the conversation, she surprised me with a challenge. "Why not teach a course?" she said, sipping her drink slowly, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Entrepreneurial responsibility. Something real. Something that talks about the choices we make, the consequences, and how to build from the ground up." I let the idea sit for a moment. Felt like something I could do. Something that could mean more than just sitting in boardrooms and listening to people who didn't care about anything but the bottom line. "I'll think about it," I said, though I knew I'd already made my decision. I could do this. I would do this. Back in Detroit, Andrea Liu had been sending me updates on the youth apprenticeship program. I'd given her that $10 million, and now I was getting videos from kids working in their first community-owned shop. They were restoring cars, learning new skills, and gaining confidence. I watched the footage over and over, not because I needed proof that my money had been well spent, but because it felt like something I could stand behind. It wasn't just about profit. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about creating something that would last. Something meaningful. Then, one day, a letter arrived from Nicole. I'd been expecting it, but that didn't make it any easier to read. She wasn't asking for anything. No plea for help, no explanation. Just a note saying she was working at a small-town driver education nonprofit. I stared at it for a while. The woman who had once been my wife, the woman who had taken everything and then tried to spin it into something it wasn't, had found a place for herself in the world again. There was something quiet about it, no fanfare, no big reveal. She had just moved on. I folded the letter and filed it away. That was all. There wasn't any bitterness in me, but there wasn't any regret either. Just a quiet, almost peaceful closure. A few months later, I walked through the floor of my new manufacturing space. It wasn't just a factory anymore. It was a place where kids like the ones Andrea worked with could learn a trade, work with their hands, and build something from nothing. The walls were lined with tools, and in every corner, you could hear the hum of machinery, the sounds of people creating. The future was being rebuilt right here in this place, and it felt more right than anything I'd done before. I took a moment to stop, looking at everything I had now. It wasn't money or headlines that had mattered. It was what I'd done with everything that came after. The best revenge? It wasn't anything that had happened to Dean or Nicole. It was moving on while they stayed stuck, while they stayed buried under their own mistakes. I smiled, knowing I was finally building something that mattered, something that would last.